Welcome to the Struggle Bubble. I'm Chad Cutting.
And I'm Craig Sergi.
Excited to have Mr. Kelly Cheeseman on our show today. Kelly is the COO and alternate governor of the LA Kings and AEG Sports. Kelly, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I'm really proud to be here for various reasons, so I'm excited.
Well, we're gonna definitely get into it. So a little bit of background. Kelly and I worked together back in 2006. My first job out of college was to work for the Anschutz Entertainment Group in Los Angeles, back when LA Live was literally a hole in the ground, and they were building everything up downtown. And I had an opportunity to work in the Kings organization. It was just an incredible time to be part of it. And Kelly, just first off, I appreciate everything that you, Matt Rosenfeld, Carol Ross, Chris McGowan did early in my career to get me up and running.
Well, thank you, Chad. I was very proud. As soon as I saw the struggle bubble start hitting the internet, I was like, man, I gotta weasel my way onto there to have a talk, have a chat with you guys.
There is no weaseling at all. We appreciate you listening and reaching out, and happy to have you on. And let's just start there. So back when I joined, that's 2006, 18 years ago. You've been with the AEG LA Kings 23 years now.
That's
For the
correct.
sports industry, that's an incredibly long time. What do you chalk it up to, being able to be as successful as you have been and be with the organization for that many years?
You know, there's always a lot of opportunity in sports. There's, hundreds of teams around the world, but there's very few in the United States. And I think when I got down to it, I had great mentors. You mentioned them, Chris and Carola, and others around me. Dan Beckerman, our CEO, who's my boss now. You get to understand like great leadership and great ownership is a value to work in this business. And Mr. Anschutz and his family are, bar none, the best in sports, and to have stability of ownership that allows us to build our plan around us and have success, challenge us, but not, micromanage us is really critical for us to do what we want to do on a day-to-day basis. And I valued that. I started at the company, we were 250 employees. We were the Kings and Staples Center at that time. And, we've grown to, one of the largest sports entertainment companies in the world. So right place, right time is a certain factor to that. So I've grown up in a company just like a startup, and you guys have been a part of those before. But it's great ownership, great people, great city, and I've grown my family here. So I'm locked in.
And you've been part of the the highest highs of, unfortunately, after I left, just with the Stanley Cup runs and two trophies that you brought home.
The secret to success.
Well, that's a separate conspiracy theory we'll get into in a second. But there's also, people see it from the outside being part of sports. So it's a glamorous, you get to go to all these games, all these high profile events. Being in LA is a whole separate benefit. We were watching the Grammys and different shows behind the scenes when we were working in Staples Center. But there are lows associated with that as well. You have some years where the team isn't performing and you're in rebuild mode. And one of the most enlightening things that I was a part of, Dean Lombardi, GM of the Kings, walked us through the age progressions of older teams, younger teams, and how you build that up. How do you stay motivated in those tougher times when the team isn't performing as well, knowing all that pressure that comes with fandom? You want to win now every single year, but it's a process.
Yeah, the tough times, it depends the scenario, right? In those tough times, early on, I think Dean really taught us about building an organization to win and what was really going to be needed to be done to achieve the long-term goal. Nobody knew if it would actually work. You see a lot of teams do it now and talk about the rebuild, and teams I think are probably a lot more transparent about their rebuilds now, and they actually say the word rebuild. Whereas in the past, you wouldn't talk about it. You probably didn't have the same media market to talk about it in the same way. But I think ultimately leaning in on a plan that everybody can build towards was the critical aspect. So you can, not only talk about it internally, but talk about it to the fans you're selling tickets to the partners that you're selling sponsorships to, and getting them aligned with that plan so that they want to be a part of that moment when you do win. And when you achieve it, like we did in 2012 and 14, it only helps the longer term piece wherein, a few years later you have to go back down and you have to rebuild a new plan, and you have many of the same partners with you, many of the same season ticket members with you, and you can communicate like, hey, we went up, now we have to go back down, and we're able to be transparent with them. And for us, it's the hardest points are when you feel like you're on that trajectory, but you don't know when that plan is gonna, take that turn. That's the hardest part because you're like, oof, that wasn't the plan. But when you can reset yourselves, it gets yourself a certain level of balance, especially for a human like me. Like I need a plan. I need a plan to talk about. That's what makes my heart feel good.
And I mean, that element of trust that you talk about is big. Not, I mean, not only in sports, but just across the board of having everybody understand that there is a plan, first of all, and that it might not be right, but it's directional. And then when there are changes, I mean, you do state of the franchise, every year, and you keep people posted, updated on everything that's going on. Do you still stay active in that community? I mean, from the time I was there, it was message boards, and now you've got all of social media, podcasts like this that are ripping the organization one way or the other. Have you seen the change over time and how you communicate with your fandom?
Yeah, it's gone wider, right? And then mainstream media has gone narrower. So the big media streams like the LA Times and some of the other platforms, they don't have as many beat writers following the team on a day. Any team, really. You talk about the fact that the New York Times bought the Athletic, and then the Athletic is thinned down, and it's just changed. So it gets a little bit more challenging in my opinion because you see things like Twitter bloggers and stuff carrying the narrative, and then bots and haters following along on that, and then a narrative can change on you. So you got to do your best job to get your story and your plan out there by doing the things like you were talking about, Chad, with state of the franchise and being available for the people that matter the most as your stakeholders with your season ticket holders and your partners. And then you got to perform. You got to execute what you're talking about, and that's what's most critical. And if you're changing from where you were talking about, it's best to try to communicate that. You can't always be as transparent as you'd like to be, but that's always the goal.
What is your advice for the Cleveland Browns franchise?
That's a tough one. I mean, Chad, you may or may not remember this, but my wife's from Cleveland as well. Um, Yesterday with my 8 and 10-year-old girl, and I don't know if this was happened to be because I was going to talk to you today, but the Browns game was on TV here locally, and every time my wife started to walk up the stairs, I would turn it off. And she's not a huge football fan, but she is a Cleveland fan, and her heart rate goes up thinking about those Browns games. I don't know if I have advice, Chad. I thought they were on a trajectory. I was actually surprised to see the record yesterday. Um,
It's best
so
for her health and your health if you turn it off. I think that's the best advice that you could give.
yeah,
Just take a little time out. But I
props
think
props to
tying
your
that back to
dad.
the
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but props to your dad for his loyalty and his bet yesterday. Because social media was definitely feeding me your feed, and I see his loyalty on that. He's committed to that win every week.
Yeah, for everybody listening, I posted on Instagram, and my dad and I talk, and my mom, every Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, depending on when the Browns play. I figure out, and I figured before the game was a better time to talk to them yesterday. And he came in fully loyal, like optimistic as all hell, which is crazy after 60 some odd years of being a Browns fan for him. And I go, no, it's 30-13 Washington. They can't contain it. And he's no way, no way. Browns are pulling it out, but we see who is the better prognosticator.
Gotta love that. Gotta love that. I mean, that to me is like the full on English stupidity. Like, England's going to win the World Cup every time we play. Like, you can't convince me other way. Not a chance. In reality, I know what's going to happen. But, dude, something there. I mean, talking about the fan base, that's exactly what it is, right? Win, lose, tie, whatever. I'm sitting my butt on that seat every single week just to see the outcome. And it's that exhilaration, right? If it's never going to happen, then it happens. I'm on cloud 9. And then when it's supposed to happen, it's probably going to take a shit. Then we're in trouble.
Yeah. one loss, sack the manager, trade all the players, and that's the way it works, right?
Well, you made a great point about the transparency. I was going to ask that about the social media stuff. Like 23 years in the game, like as you said, the normal media was huge, right? The Washington Post owned by Amazon, all that kind of stuff. But now, like one tweet from a player could explode the locker room. Like just so many variables. Now you have to think about that. 23 years ago, none of us thought about that, right? I don't. MySpace, maybe. Um, Probably
Not
not.
no, not yet.
And then it's just like within 15 years, it's just exploded. And to your point, now you've got bots reposting stuff. You don't know what's true, what's false. Like, how do you deal with that? Or do you just kind of block out as much as you can and, you know, kind of just let it be? And that's got to be tough.
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, you have all the tools to, listen, do social listening and hear what fans are talking about, and you can see sentiment trends and, what works and what doesn't. I mean, the biggest change is obviously the amount of content that we're able to put out. I mean, as you talk about 23 years ago, I remember actually Chad, Carol Ross was in town the other day, and we were talking about our first website that started, I think, the year after I started, and it was LAKings.com was basically like a business card. It had 888 Kings LA and LAKings.com posted on it, but that's it. That's it. It was like a picture. It was like a billboard. So, none of that existed. The message boards like Let's Go Kings.com started a few years later, and people started chatting about the teams, and that was social media at that time. Twitter and Facebook and MySpace or the Facebook didn't start till, quite a few years later. So it was you had more beat writers and traditional media covering it at that point. So I'm not sure it was significantly different because I remember the LA Times would cover the stories about the performance of the team and they carried the narrative, and it was just more centralized and but fandom of sports is the reality of what makes us great. And it's not rational. It is not rational. And that's what you have to realize. And my first job, just like Chad, was selling tickets, and I got put on the phone selling tickets, and we traded our captain within, I think, the first week that I was on the job, and I didn't have a computer yet, so I just had to pick up the phone with the cord on it and listen to season ticket holders. And my biggest realization at that point is their passion is what plays through, whether they're mad or they just want to talk to somebody. Like, it's incredible that they're spending a lot of money to have season tickets to a team and they want to talk to you. I'm a lowly, like entry level employee at that point, and they want to talk to me about the team. And I thought that was really cool, actually. And then at the end, I'd say, all right, well, let's talk about renewing your tickets. And they'd be like, all right, yeah, let's go ahead and get that taken care of.
Isn't that the most beautiful thing though in the sports world?
It
Like
is.
you put that hat on, or you put that badge on, or you put that shirt on, whatever, in whatever capacity you're part of that club, people just want to dive in with you straight into the deep end. So, what do you think about this? How does the season look? What's it? And they're just so bored. Like I love everything about that. As you said, people save up their life savings for tickets for certain games, and just that feeling of you're giving it all. Like the team's got to give it all for these people. Like you got to leave it all out there.
Yeah, and then when you win, they're crying in the stands with
Oh,
their,
it's
their
unbelievable.
their moms and their dads, and it kind of gives me chills just thinking about it
Oh
right
yeah,
now.
naming their kids after players.
Yeah, their
I
daughters,
love
their
it.
kids, like it's not rational, but it's why we have jobs. It's why this industry is so great, and it's powered by the fans, and it's the work that the players put in on an everyday basis ultimately gives everybody something to cheer about in this business. So it's
Love
it's
that.
fun, and then when you get exposed to going overseas, and we took the team to Melbourne, Australia last year, and we got to take them to an AFL semifinal game with Collingwood, and like our players hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen anything like that before, but 90,000 people in, the cricket grounds in Melbourne and going nuts over a sport we had never really seen before. And you're like, geez, it's just, it multiplies in the world about, different sports, and people are passionate about different things, and it brings people together in cool moments.
Yeah, it really does. It's just cool. What do you think about the overseas tours? I mean, it was the Jets in London last week, and I'm seeing it become more and more popular um, year over year now. Like the world's getting smaller, so these franchises are now taking I won't say advantage, but it's a great brand exposure, new sport, etc.
Yeah, I'd say international expansion across sports is one of the biggest trends that we're all a part of, and we're all seeing, and we've done as well, with the Kings and the Galaxy for years. And, AEG, we're one of the largest sports entertainment companies in the world with facilities all over the world. So we've hosted big events, whether they have us in them or not. In the O2 in London, we host the NBA, NCAA. In basketball, we hosted, Kings hockey over there as well. We've had the Kings over in Shanghai and Beijing, the Kings in Melbourne. The Galaxy, especially in our David Beckham era, has played all over the
Yeah.
world. So you've seen it kind of come both ways now, Craig. You started seeing the Premier League and the international teams start coming to the U.S. 10, 15 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And then you started seeing the media deals expand, right? Nobody, those early days of, the big clubs coming over to the U.S., they were just playing games, but there wasn't a media deal yet. Now you have, the Premier League on NBC and on Amazon, and people now. In my, experience in dealing with soccer in the U.S., you start seeing significantly more fans having their club in the U.S. And that was really the original vision of the MLS, is that people would have their club overseas. They'd have their international club that they're fans of, but they'd also have their local club. You didn't see it happen on the same standard that you have now, but now you definitely have it. It almost feels more mainstream. I have
Oh,
friends that are
100%.
Liverpool fans and Manchester fans and Chelsea fans, and I really, that's a testament to me of the way that international has expanded and the media, the deals have expanded, because when you get up, you're a sports fan, it's 7 a.m. and there's a game on right away that you can watch. I mean, they're in. They
Yeah.
think it's cool. And they didn't think it was cool 10, 15 years ago. So
Oh,
it's
I've seen it. I mean, I remember when I first came here 17, 18 years ago now, we were struggling to find a channel. And generally it was in Spanish because that were the only ones that would, show international games. And now I'm watching NBC every month. They've got more games on in this country than they do in England because of the media rights. And then you have, Chad and I talk about this all the time. The Welcome to Wrexham thing would never existed. Never would have seen the day of light, 15 years ago. And now all the ownerships that are taking place across the globe, people buying second and third division teams because of the Wrexham thing, but then the big boys buying Man U and etc. over the last 10 years, it's phenomenal. It really is. And then again, the flip side, watching the Jets game yesterday, and people inside of Wembley or the new Wembley, wearing every single shirt. There was Niners fans. There was just actual football fans in the UK. They wanted to go watch a game. It really is becoming, again, the globe's getting smaller through sports, but now every sport has an opportunity in every country, which is really cool to see.
it is. It is.
Kelly, as we've talked with other guests about the pressure of the job and the switch to remote work over the past couple of years, you talk about all this fandom, the global pressure, everything that's happening around the world in the sports industry. You're not really able to do fully remote. You need to be in the office and or at the events and working outside of normal business hours. How has that pressure been for you? How have you viewed the world? Now that we're a few years away from that odd 2020-2021 season.
Um, I was thinking a lot about this question, and it hasn't been easy, just to be fully transparent. It's when your workforce has changed and recruiting has changed and people have changed and kind of I'd say the workforce split, right? There was a group of people that they're like, this is cool, I want to stay remote. And, those people have moved on, and there's others that are like, don't want anything to do with remote. That, or at least a certain amount of presence in person is what drives them as a human. And that's when you realize that everybody is different and you need to be adaptive to that and flexible to that. So, it seems trivial to say it, but utilizing tools like we're using today, whether it's Teams or Zoom or, content creation around podcasts like we're doing today, is the adaptation that we've had to make. And it's really kind of cool to see that we can create special moments like this where we can have this conversation by doing these things. We have quite a few meetings, and, Chad, you were around AEG for a long time. We were always kind of in different spots, right? Because we're growing, expanding as a company. So we're on, conference calls, 800 conference calls, and people would be in one building at LA Live and, at Staples Center or down in El Segundo, and we're all, trying to lead a conference call, and we kind of adapted to that. So to a certain extent, we were there before, just because of the nature of our company, and now it's a little bit different. So we have, some people in the conference room, some people on Teams at home that day, and you have to be understanding, adaptive, and communicating to the best of your ability. And it's not easy all the time, but like you said, there's a standard you have to set because sports is in person. At some point, you got to land at that arena and execute an event. And if you're doing it well, the event's sold out and the reaction's well, and then you have to trust your people. It gets edgy at times because sometimes you're like, I need to talk to this person, and it you just have to take a deep breath, put yourself in balance for a second, and then find a way to execute.
What about at home, with your wife? You didn't have the kids when you first started 23 years ago, and you're going through this, and the job is what it is, and you've executed at a high level. You're there at the events. You're making that work. There's another side of that that's happening at home. There's the soccer games and the dinners. How has that uh, struggle been with you and the family?
Yeah, again, it's not easy, because we have so many events that we're at, and I have expectations to be at those events. Over time, I've had to lower my expectations and realize that, like, that game's happening one way or the other, and the players are going to be there one way or the other playing a game. So if I need to take my girls on a camping trip and I'm gonna miss a game at home, like, I need to I need to be okay with that. And I realize in those moments, like, my girls love that more than anything else. So you have to prioritize those things. So for me, standardizing, my family's health, my personal health, and doing things like making sure I prioritize walking my girls to school, a couple days a week. But also realizing that's a reset for me, and my wife and I can walk back from school together and catch up for 30 minutes on that walk and talk about things for the week. Those are the little things to me that have made it, brought the balance. And then when I'm not having events, going and picking up my girls, they're both in competitive gymnastics, and my wife's at the gym with the girls, and I'm picking up one, bringing them home. It seems like we'd call it the struggle bubble, or as you guys would say, right? But, it's, to me, those are the balance things, like prioritizing that and realizing that drive home for 15 minutes with my youngest daughter, where she wants to tell me about her day, like, those are important moments that you have to take in, and prioritizing, getting on that bike and going to dinner on Sundays and realizing that they love that. So, um, it's balancing it all and realizing that those things are really important. And the moment you think that they're not important or your job is more important, long term, that's going to have a mental effect on you.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because we had a sales leader on here said the same thing. Like the deal's still going to be there when you get back. It's either going to win, it's going to complete. And I say it in soccer all the time, right? The game's the game. It will take care of itself, right? So it's still going to be there. I've done it as long as I know my prep. it's going to happen either way. So now I've got to be in the flow state, which is my mental, space, time with my kids, my family, whatever, to make sure that everything's still in motion, even if I'm not physically present. So it's really cool to hear that it's in every form, right? From where you are in the sports industry to a sales leader to picking up the phone, trying to sell tickets when we didn't have the internet. It's the same thing, right? Just different stages.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about gymnastics for a second, though, because that's a whole different crazy parent environment. How how have you approached being a spectator at? Are they in meets? Are they at the age where they're doing those types of things, or is it just individual classes?
Yeah, our 10-year-old was in meets last year in level three, and she did great. I mean, she got, I'm like, I'll brag on her for a
Do
second.
it.
She got first, on four meets, she got first place all around in three out of four meets last year, and got second in the state in a couple things, and first in the state, and which was cool. Like, we had no idea it was coming, Chad. Like, we went to like my gym to make sure that they're tumbling safely, and the next thing you know, like, we got sucked into this sport that really I was terrified, my wife was terrified to be around, but it's a really cool sport. They move them in such like steps at a time that especially at the age they're in right now, it's a lot safer than it looks like, especially when they get to level 9, 10. You see all those crazy things, flips and turns going on. We love it. We go to the same spot 3 to 4 days a week. There's no like, what field am I going to? I'm going to the same gym 3 to 4 days a week. The practices are longer, 3.5 hours, but it's pretty standard to any sort of competitive sport. And then the meets are 4 or 5 times a year for 4 hours, and then I'm done. I don't have a tournament that starts on Friday or Thursday that I'm traveling to. If they lose, they're playing on Friday in Riverside, and if they win, they're going to be playing on, Saturday in Ontario. Like, that's not in our sport. It's one stop for 4 hours.
You
So
don't have to brag, Kelly.
that's
It's
my bias as to like I realized like that actually is pretty cool. It's one and done versus all you other soccer parents and stuff that I watch, and I'm like, man, that looks great. That looks great.
it's great for you. It's great.
Whatever
Do
makes you happy.
they enjoy going to the hockey games?
They do. They love it. I mean, they've come since they were babies, right? Going to you know, Kings games and Galaxy games. Like they absolutely love it. They're incredibly spoiled with the access obviously they have being around all the parents that have worked here, whatever level they've been at for years. Like we talk about like how spoiled our kids are to be in, special seats and suites and around the mascots and all those things.
Good old
But
Bailey.
yeah, good old Bailey. They love them and they love the events and they're huge fans. So it's cool to see.
Did you grow up? You grew up playing hockey. What were the sports that you were involved with as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up playing hockey until I was 18 in Minnesota, so in the state of hockey and played through high school at a pretty good level. It's not why I'm in hockey today. It just happened to be, the job opportunity. And then I grew up playing baseball and played baseball in college and also played, some soccer and football and stuff when I was a kid. But I was always in and around sports, and when I went to college, it was just kind of those early days of where the business of sports was getting adapted into the business schools and being communicated as a potential major. I didn't actually major in sports business, but it was became a conversation around something that actually happens where you're like, it's not just a general manager and a coach running a team. Like there's a whole other thing. The sports business journal started, and you started kind of studying the business, and that's how I landed in here.
Speaking of Sports Business Journal, they come out with the top 40 under 40, which I believe, were you on that list?
I was.
What about the 50 under 50? Do you
They
tail off at the end? Is that what happens?
don't have a 50 under 50. They have things like legacies and yeah. I don't think I'll make it there, Chad. I don't.
I was gonna say you get after you're 40 years old, and then they're like, whatever, they can retire.
Yeah, they have the 30 under 30 and like they're looking more for the up and comers rather than the old codgers like
The old
myself.
stalwarts that have
Yeah,
been
yeah,
running a successful organization in one of the largest major metros in the United States or the world.
yeah. So
The question on the sports is interesting because we have our own kids that you want to see them play the sports that you played because it's just easier. You have an expertise for me in baseball, football, Craig, and soccer. but seeing it through your kids' eyes is just have been completely different. You can't force them to like any sport. It's just got to follow the passion that they have. With you and Andrea, is that been consistent? Neither of you are in gymnastics, but is there a level of desire to see them experimenting with hockey or softball, baseball?
Early on, I was excited to see them. They wanted to skate, and they were doing the learn to skate programs here, and marketing work. The Lions was our girls program, and they talked a lot about being a Lion. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But as they got into it, and they kind of drifted away from it, and we just saw them, being more interested in soccer initially because their friends were more in soccer. Kind of drifts towards like where they're gonna have the most fun and where they have connection to people, and then gymnastics just kind of came out of nowhere. And then they got on a team, and then their connection to the friends that are on their team is what's most important. Being a part of a team is what Andre and I wanted them to do the most. Andrea was a swimmer, and track and field, and different more individual type sports, but still on a team. And I was more kind of the team sport type of person. That's really what we wanted most out of our kids, is to be in an activity that they have to commit to. Make sure that they're busy. And yeah, I've always set the standard for them that be a great teammate is the one thing that we want them to be on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in the family or with your classmates. Like, be a great teammate is a standard that we expect out of them. Like, look out for your friends, look out for your sister, look out for your teammates, and help support them.
Yeah, I love gym as well. My kids do dance, and it's those 3 or 4 hours a night. I'm like, there's no way my mental capacity could have done that at that age. There's not a chance. I would have been space cadetting all over the place. But seeing the kids dialed in for 3 hours straight is unbelievable to me to watch. And I always say it's kind of a setup for life to a certain degree. Like, if you can dial in that hard for that amount of time at this young age, the future's pretty positive. And to your point, you're an individual in a team sport, which is life as well, right? You've got your own goals, etc., but part of family or whatever that is. I gym and dance cross pretty heavily, and I also agree. I sit down in an auditorium for 2 days straight for 8 hours, and then I'm done for another 3 weeks. So I like that.
I don't even have that. I have one day for 4 hours to be clear, which is great. So, but you're right. I think for good or the bad, youth sports has changed dramatically, probably from the time that we've all grew up. And we probably all were able to grow up playing two or three sports. And that's not the way it works, unfortunately. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. We operate teams, and we have 7 rinks that we operate, and multiple soccer facilities that we operate around the city of LA. And, to and, our clubs that are in the leagues are part of the problem too. But it's just the way that the sports have changed, and sports specialization, I think, is not great. But it's ultimately, once you get into it, it's kind of a path you kind of get sucked into. And um, I just want to make sure that my kids are happy, and they're really continuing to enjoy it. And our youngest, who's 7, like, we've really pressed her, like, is this really what you want to do? Because I know she's following her big sister more than anything. And so we're continuing to press her, and she's really good. She's probably the better athlete of the two, um, but she's maybe not the best gymnast of the two. So we always press her, like, is this what you really want to do? And she is always like, yes, yes. And then she works her tail off, and it's cool. It's cool to watch a 7-year-old, you know.
That checking in is so massive though, and it's not even something that 20 years ago. I mean, our parents didn't really check in. It's like, you're in the sport, and there's no quitting. You're in it. But yeah, if they're motivated and passionate about it, and you're checking in, it goes a long way, because they feel a little bit more secure in what they're doing. They could walk away, and they're doing it for the right reasons, which is absolutely massive.
Yeah.
Well, and they get to that age, about 12 to 14, I see that changing a little bit. That's where the burnout I'm seeing is coming way earlier nowadays. that you've been dialed into one sport so much that you got nothing left, or the passion is so strong they're accelerating, and we're going through the phases of now, like, when do you start homeschooling, right? So take it to the next extreme, right? You've specified so much and they're getting to a certain level, well, now they need to be competing. I go through, this is a tangent, but I go through this all the time about not going to college and going straight to the pros like we do in Europe, like skipping things to get to the end goal, because at the end of the day, your lifespan as a pro finishes at between 33 and 35 if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So if you can accelerate that earlier, but I don't know what the consequences are at the same time, right? So we have a lot of conversations about this with the parents.
Yeah, and I think it's developing an expectation too. I mean, the Galaxy, we have our academy, and you see the kids come into the academy and they have a path. They have a clear path with our club where the club can ultimately have their rights and they can get on to the second league team from, the time they're 15, 16. So there's a clear path, whereas, and like the Kings and other sports, like the players have to get drafted. So, we have kids in our AAA and AA programs that are in our rinks that are in the Junior Kings or the Lions. They can't get drafted by the Kings. They could, but like we don't own their rights. So, you see more of a conversation, or we try to push to our coaches more of a conversation around what's the goal. Like, do you want to be, play in college? Do you want to play in juniors? Like, set a path for yourself that's a realistic expectation, because I can't control whether you're going to play on the first line with the National Hockey League team. That's not my job. But you have to set, what your team and your goals, expectations are for your family.
And you guys see it from a different angle as well, because the governing bodies all have their own little ways around this as well. So you really see it. I see it from the soccer side and see it from some other sports, but football specifically, like, you just can't get drafted at 18. You just physically, you're not there. So
Right.
you've got to go and do something else in between college, etc. And now there's all that finance in the college side of the game, right? We talked to Thomas about this at Stanford with baseball. It's like these kids, like, I can't blame them. Somebody's offering you $200,000 to $500,000 to go to a school. You come from middle of nowhere, kind of blue collar. You're going to take the money, because again, you don't know how long your lifespan is as a pro athlete if you even get there. So that's changed a lot of things as well, which we're turning into a sports podcast right now.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we could go down the path of NIL in a second here, but that's not my area of expertise.
Yeah,
I'll
we're
be
gonna have an NIL special in the coming months because it's gotten a little out of control. But with the time that we do have left, Kelly, I'm picturing that 22-year-old trying to make a decision to go into the sports world, and it's alluring. And you see the franchises that you grew up with or that are in the area of your college. What advice do you have for somebody entering into their business career, into that professional sports career, based on your expertise over the last 23 years?
Um, you know, my area, the reason I chose to get in sports, and originally I wanted to be an engineer like my dad, and I realized my first year of freshman calculus at Seton Hall that I was not going to be an engineer. So it I wanted to be in something that I was going to be passionate about, getting up and doing on a day-to-day basis. And for me, being in sales and marketing, building brand around a sport was what was going to get me up and make me passionate about my job. I've been very fortunate to grow into a very senior level at an organization that I'm very proud of our brand. And, you know, that's what makes me get up. So if you're 22, 23 and you're trying to get into the business like, find what you're most passionate about. Like, what's going to get you out of bed and be excited about going to work. And that's where you should follow. And a level of patience is very hard these days, especially when more things are in front of us and more readily available. But for me, patience has always worked out. And more often than not, I see opportunities that are missed by employees because they were impatient for maybe just a year or 6 months, and it could have worked out after that. And it's not always perfect. Like, I'm not going to say that things are always perfect for you all the times. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be managers that aren't great. There's going to be, employees around you that aren't great. But if you do what you're supposed to do and you're passionate about what you do and kind of keep your head down and keep going, usually things break through for you based on performance. And it's hard to walk away from things, but a lot of times I've seen it where people walk away and then a break could have happened. And that breaks my heart a lot of times to see. Now there's a lot of people that have gone on and have done great things that I'm super proud of as well. So follow your passion is what I'd say is the most important thing to do.
Fantastic advice. Well, Kelly, we've really appreciated the conversation and for joining us today. I believe the LA Kings season starts on the 10th of October against Buffalo Sabres. Is that right?
That's correct. On the road, the 24th at home.
Excellent. Well, we wish you and the entire organization a ton of luck this year. I know all of the Sharks fans listening in Los Gatos. Yes, I said what I said. First hockey experience in person with the Los Angeles Kings and the organization. I owe a lot of thanks to everything. As I mentioned, you, Kelly, Matt, Chris, Carola, the whole crew down there. So please give everybody our best. If you haven't already, please follow us on Instagram, the Struggle Bubble Pod. We are posting more and more content there, including this great episode with Kelly Cheeseman. Kelly, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Craig. Pleasure to be a part
Kelly.
of it.
All right, we'll see everybody next week.